Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be getting into Apex made easy for Salesforce admins, coding over coffee and cake.
Hmm.
And as you might guess, this book promises to make learning Apex about as enjoyable as a warm slice of cake.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Right.
You know, it's funny because when I first picked up this book, what really stood out was that it was written by Vikas Cohen and dedicated to Christina,
Oh,
his partner.
interesting.
Yeah. And that dedication's not just like a sweet gesture. It actually sets the whole tone for the book.
I see it.
Like you immediately get this feeling of, we're in this together.
Right.
Let's learn this together. It makes coding seem a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, because I think that's something that a lot of Salesforce admins struggle with, right?
Absolutely.
They hear Apex and they think, oh, I'm not a developer. That's not for me.
Right. It's like this whole other world.
Exactly.
But this book really tries to break down those barriers and show you that even just like a little bit of Apex can actually make you a way more powerful admin.
So what are some of the ways that, even like a basic understanding of Apex can actually help an admin?
Well, think about all those times that you've hit like a wall in Salesforce.
Okay.
You're trying to do something and you just can't do it with standard tools.
Right.
Like you need to automate some process that's super complicated, or you want to create like a custom function that just doesn't exist out of the box.
Right.
That's where Apex comes in.
I see.
It gives you the power to basically like go beyond those limitations and really tailor Salesforce to exactly what your organization needs.
So it sounds like this book is really geared towards that admin who's ready to kind of take that next step. They've mastered all the clicks, not code stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They're ready to kind of like dip their toes into the code,
Yeah.
but they need a gentle push.
Okay.
And the book does that by following Christina, this
Yeah.
Salesforce admin, and she realizes she needs to learn Apex.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing is she's not a coder. She's not like some
Right.
tech whiz.
Yeah.
She's drawn to baking. And so that's what the book uses to kind of break down all these complex Apex concepts.
So it's like using her passion to kind of open that door into this new world.
Exactly. It's like connecting something new and challenging like coding with something that's already familiar and enjoyable.
Right.
And in Christina's case, it's coffee and cakes.
Okay, so let's actually get into some of the, the meat of the book here.
Sure.
So the book starts with, I think, one of the most fundamental concepts in coding, and that's variables and data types.
Yes.
I love how it compares variables to containers that you would use in the kitchen to hold your ingredients.
Oh, I love that too.
All right, so you've got each container has a label, and that's your variable name, and it holds a specific type of ingredient,
Right.
and that's your data type.
Right. And understanding those data types is super important because it tells you how you can interact with that information that's stored in those variables.
Okay.
So it's not just about putting flour in a container labeled flour.
Yeah.
It's understanding that that flour container, it's holding a specific type of data, a quantity, which is probably represented by a number.
Okay.
And then you can actually use that data in your code to do things like calculate or, make decisions.
So if you're trying to figure out how much flour you need to triple a batch of cookies, you need to make sure that the data in your flour variable is a number, not like text or something.
Yeah, you can't triple the word flour.
Exactly.
You need a number.
Right. And that kind of highlights the importance of really getting those fundamentals solid, even if they seem simple at first.
Absolutely. And the book builds on that foundation by introducing operators,
Okay.
which are basically like the tools that let you manipulate the data that's in those variables, just like you would use a whisk to combine ingredients or a measuring cup to make sure you have the right proportions.
I think the book uses an example of Christina doubling a cheesecake recipe.
Yes.
So instead of going through and manually like recalculating every ingredient,
Right.
she uses that multiplication operator to just effortlessly adjust the quantities in her code.
Exactly. It's like having one of those handy kitchen gadgets that makes baking so much easier and more efficient.
And so that kind of brings us to another key concept, and that's control flow statements.
Yes.
Which I think this is where things start to get a little more
complicated.
intricate.
Yeah.
But the book does a great job of breaking it down, I think,
It
by
does.
comparing it to that decision-making process that you go through when you're following a recipe.
Yeah, because you think about it, baking is all about making decisions. Like, do I have enough eggs? If not, do I need to run to the store? Is my oven preheated? Should I adjust the baking time based on the size of the pan?
Right, all those little decisions that you make as you're going.
Yeah, and control flow statements let you program those decisions into your code.
Okay.
So you can create different paths of execution based on certain conditions.
Okay, I see.
So it's like, if this then that.
I like the example that the book uses where Christina wants to bake 3 batches of cookies.
Yeah.
So instead of writing out the same code 3 times.
Right. Which would be a pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She uses a loop.
Yes.
Which basically tells the code to repeat a certain set of instructions a specific number of times.
It's a shortcut.
It is a shortcut.
It's like saying, okay, do this 3 times instead of writing it out 3 times.
Exactly. So it really helps with that, efficiency and making sure that your code is not super redundant.
Yeah. And it shows how these seemingly basic coding concepts can actually make a big difference in how productive and efficient you are as a coder.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of those individual pieces of data,
right?
Variables, those containers. But now the book moves into ways of grouping and organizing data using collections.
Yes.
And it compares this to how a well-stocked pantry is organized, right? You've got different shelves for different types of ingredients.
Categories.
Exactly. And we'll dive deeper into collections when we come back.
Sounds good.
After a short break.
Looking forward to it.
Right.
So we were talking about collections.
Right. Those pantry shelves in our code.
Exactly.
So what are the different types of collections and like why would I choose one over another?
Okay. So let's stick with this pantry analogy.
Okay.
Imagine you have a shopping list.
Okay.
That's like a list in Apex.
Right.
The order of items on that list matters.
Right.
You want to get the milk before the ice cream melts.
Exactly. You don't want to come home with a puddle of melted ice cream.
Right, exactly.
So a list is for when the sequence of the data is important.
Yes.
What about when order doesn't matter?
Think about your spice rack.
Okay.
You're not going to have like 2 jars of oregano, right?
Right.
That's what a set is in Apex. It's all about unique elements, no duplicates.
No duplicates.
Okay.
So lists are ordered. Sets are unique.
Okay.
What about the third type?
Yeah, what's the third one?
That's a map.
Think of your recipe book.
Okay.
Each recipe name is linked to a specific set of instructions.
Okay.
In Apex, a map stores data as key value pairs.
Okay.
So the key, like the recipe name, lets you quickly access its associated value.
Okay.
The instructions.
So if Christina wanted to store all of her cake recipes in Apex, she could use a map.
Yeah.
Where the cake name is the key. And then the recipe's the value.
Exactly. And then she can easily find the right instructions just by knowing the name of the cake.
Perfect. I'm loving these analogies.
Me too. They make it so much easier to understand.
Okay, so now let's get into something that sounds a little more intimidating.
Okay.
Classes and objects.
Woo, yeah.
Is this where we need like a hard hat and safety goggles?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Think of a class as a blueprint.
Okay.
Let's say Christina is famous for her cheesecake.
Okay, she's the cheesecake queen.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
The recipe itself is the class.
Okay.
It defines the core characteristics.
Right.
The ingredients, the baking time, the temperature.
I'm seeing where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So each cheesecake that she bakes is an object.
Exactly. Each object shares those core characteristics defined in the class. But each cheesecake might be a little different.
Right.
Maybe one's a tad more golden brown or has a touch more vanilla.
So the class is like the master template.
Yes.
And then the objects are the individual instances created from that.
You got it.
I like to think of it like cookie cutters. You have the cutter, that's the class. And then you use that to make a bunch of individual cookies, which are the objects.
I love that analogy. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, cool.
And this whole concept of classes and objects is central to object-oriented programming, which is what Apex is based on.
And the book actually walks you through creating a recipe class in Apex.
It does.
So you define its properties like the ingredients and the baking time, and then its methods.
Yes.
Which are like the actions that can be performed on those properties.
Exactly. So things like mixing the batter, preheating the oven.
Oh, okay, that kind of stuff.
And this is where things get really cool, right? Because you can start creating relationships between these classes.
Oh, yeah.
Just like in the real world, recipes kind of relate to each other. So you could have like a cheesecake class.
Right.
That inherits properties from like a more general dessert class.
Exactly. And that's called inheritance.
Right.
It lets you reuse code and create a hierarchy that makes your programs more efficient and organized.
So you've got like your master recipe for dessert.
Yes.
And then you can create your specialized recipes for cheesecake, brownies, cookies.
Exactly.
Right.
And they all share those basic dessert properties, but then they have their own unique twists.
Okay, now let's talk about something that sounds pretty crucial. Triggers.
Yes.
The book refers to them as like the magic of Salesforce.
The magic. Yeah.
Why are they so important?
Okay, so triggers are like those automatic timers you set on your oven.
Okay.
They allow you to automate actions in Salesforce based on certain events.
Think of it like having a little helper in the background that's always watching for certain actions.
Okay.
And then jumps in and performs a task that you've predefined.
So if I wanted to automatically send a welcome email every time a new customer signs up, a trigger would be the way to do that.
You got it.
Okay.
You would set up a trigger that fires after insert on the contact object.
Yeah.
So whenever a new contact record is created, boom.
The trigger sends the email.
The trigger sends the email automatically. You don't even have to think about it.
That's amazing. It frees up so much time.
It does, and it ensures consistency because it happens every time.
Every single time.
Yes.
I love the example the book uses where it ties back to Christina's world.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine she needs to automatically reorder ingredients when they fall below a certain level.
Right.
She could set up a trigger that fires before update on her inventory object.
Yes.
So before any changes are saved to that inventory, the trigger checks those quantities, and if something's low, it automatically places an order.
It's like having a self-restocking pantry.
It is.
You never run out of essential ingredients.
You're always ready to bake.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
It's all about automating those tedious tasks and making your Salesforce org run smoother.
Smoother and more efficient.
More efficiently, exactly.
Speaking of efficiency,
yes,
let's talk about SOQL and SOSL.
Okay.
Those acronyms sound like they could be some newfangled baking ingredient.
Oh, right. Maybe some kind of new sugar substitute.
Right.
But they're not ingredients.
Okay.
But they're just as essential for a Salesforce admin
Okay.
as flour and sugar are for a baker.
Okay, so what are they?
So SOQL and SOSL are your tools for retrieving information from the Salesforce database.
So instead of like manually digging through all of that data,
It would take forever.
yeah, we can use these tools to find exactly what we need.
You got it.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's SOQL?
Okay, so SOQL stands for Salesforce Object Query Language.
Okay.
It's for targeted queries. Think of it like using the index in a cookbook. You know exactly what recipe you're looking for, and you use specific keywords to find it.
So if I wanted to find all the customer orders for a specific product that were placed in like a certain date range, I would use SOQL to search that order object with those specific filters.
Exactly. You can filter by any field on the object, so you can pinpoint the exact data you need.
Okay. And what about SOSL? When would I use that?
So SOSL stands for Salesforce Object Search Language.
Catchy.
I know, right?
Okay.
It's for broader searches. Think of it like using the search bar on a website.
Okay.
You might not know exactly what you're looking for, but you have some keywords in mind.
So if I just wanted to find all records related to a specific customer, even if I don't know what object it's stored in,
Right.
I can use SOSL to kind of cast a wider net.
Exactly. SOSL searches across multiple objects.
Okay, so it's a little less precise.
A little less precise,
Yeah.
but powerful when you don't know exactly where the information is.
I like how the book emphasizes that both of these, SOQL and SOSL, are subject to governor limits,
Yes.
which are basically like resource constraints in Salesforce.
Right. It's like managing your oven space and baking time.
Okay.
It can't just bake an unlimited number of cakes simultaneously
Right.
without running into problems.
Yeah, your oven's going to explode.
Exactly. So similarly, you need to write efficient queries to avoid hitting those governor limits
Okay.
and impacting the performance of your org.
So it's not just about knowing how to write the query. It's about understanding the limitations
Yeah.
and writing code that kind of works within those rules.
Exactly. It's about thinking like a developer.
Right.
Even if you're not building like a full-blown application,
Yeah.
it's about being smart about how you use resources.
Okay, that's great. I think this has been a really helpful overview of some of the key concepts covered in Apex Made Easy for Salesforce admins.
Me too. I think it's a great starting point for any admin who wants to learn more about Apex.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground from variables and collections and stringers.
Yeah, we've been busy.
But what happens when things go wrong,
Ah.
right? Because let's face it, even the most experienced bakers have those moments where the cake falls flat or the cookies burn.
It happens to the best of us.
So how do we deal with those kind of errors in our code?
That's where exception handling comes in.
Okay.
It's like having a fire extinguisher in your kitchen. You hope you never need it, but it's good to have it just in case.
So an exception is basically an error that pops up while your code is running.
Exactly.
Like if you try to divide by 0 or access some data that doesn't exist.
Right. And if you don't handle those exceptions properly, your program can crash.
Oh, no.
So exception handling gives you a way to catch those errors and either fix them or provide like an alternative path of execution.
Like a detour?
Exactly, a detour.
Okay.
The book uses this great analogy.
Right.
Imagine Christina forgets the baking powder in her cake.
Oh, no.
Disaster, right?
It's not looking good.
Well, maybe not a complete disaster. You can't like magically add the baking powder after the cake is in the oven.
Right.
But you can try to salvage the situation.
Okay.
Maybe turn it into a trifle or use it as a base for something else.
Okay. So you're saying there's still hope?
There's still hope.
Okay.
So in coding, you would use a try-catch block.
Okay.
The try part contains the code that might cause the error, and the catch part is your backup plan if an exception occurs.
So it's like having a plan B.
Yeah, exactly. Plan B.
In case plan A goes south.
And in that catch block, you can try to fix the problem. You can log the error for later investigation. Or at least you can display like a user-friendly message instead of just like a cryptic error.
Right, because that's always helpful.
Right. Nobody wants to see like error code 404.
Exactly.
So it's all about anticipating those little hiccups.
Yeah.
And making sure that your program doesn't completely crash when something unexpected happens.
Now, even with exception handling, we still want to make sure that we're thoroughly testing our code. So that's where unit testing comes in.
Yes, unit testing is like pasting your batter before you bake the whole cake. You want to make sure the flavors are balanced.
Makes sense. Catch those issues early.
Exactly.
So an Apex unit tests are kind of like these mini experiments where you're testing individual units of your code, like specific methods or functions, to make sure that they're behaving as expected.
The book talks about how Christina would write unit tests for her recipes.
Okay.
So let's say she has a method that calculates the total cost of a cake based on the ingredients and quantity.
Okay.
She would write a unit test to simulate different orders.
Okay.
Like a single layer cake, a multi-layer cake, one with decorations. And for each test, she would define the expected outcome.
Okay.
So the correct total cost.
Right.
And then she would run the test and compare the actual result with her expectation.
Okay.
If they match, great. Her code is working as intended.
Awesome.
If not, it's time to do some debugging.
Debugging, now that sounds a little bit like detective work.
It is. It's like figuring out why your code isn't doing what you expect it to do.
Go ahead.
And luckily, Salesforce gives us tools for that.
Okay.
Like debug logs, which are kind of like detailed notes.
So you can go back and see all the steps that led up to that.
Exactly.
Okay. And then what about this system debug method I keep hearing about?
So system.debug is kind of like adding little sticky notes to your code.
Okay.
You're marking specific points where you want to peek behind the curtain and see what's going on. You can check the values of variables or conditions as your code is running.
So it's kind of like having a little spy inside your program.
Exactly.
Telling you all the secrets.
Okay, so once your code is tested, debugged, and working perfectly, it's time to deploy it.
Okay.
Which basically means moving it from your development environment to your production environment where your users can actually access it.
Makes sense.
The book touches upon two key deployment approaches, change sets and Git.
Okay, I've heard those terms thrown around. What's the difference?
So think of change sets as traditional cake carriers.
Okay.
They work well for small deployments, moving a few components at a time.
But if you're dealing with like a huge bakery with tons of recipes and multiple bakers collaborating, you need something more.
You need something more robust.
Industrial strength.
Exactly. That's where Git comes in.
Okay.
It's like having a sophisticated delivery system that tracks all the changes, allows for collaboration, and ensures consistency across deployments.
So it's really important for those larger, more complex projects.
Yes, especially when you have teams working together.
And then finally, the book wraps up with some best practices and design patterns.
Yes, the tried and true techniques that experienced developers use to write high-quality, maintainable code.
So it's not just about getting the code to work.
Right.
It's about writing code that's efficient,
yes,
organized, and easy for others to understand.
Exactly like having a well-organized kitchen.
Right.
With all the right tools in the right places.
So it sounds like this book, Apex Made Easy for Salesforce Admins, really does live up to its name.
I think so.
It takes what can be a pretty daunting topic and makes it approachable and even fun.
It does, and it uses those relatable analogies from the world of baking
Right.
to really solidify those concepts.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
If you're a Salesforce admin who's ever felt intimidated by Apex, I definitely encourage you to check out this book.
I second that.
It might just change your perspective and give you the confidence to take your Salesforce skills to the next level.
And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to bake a cake.
Or two.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.